The clinking of silverware was the only sound that seemed alive in the room. My dad sat at the head of the table like a judge waiting for a confession. The chandelier above us threw gold light across polished plates, but the warmth didn't reach me. Across from him, Lena smiled in that smooth, rehearsed way that always made me feel like I'd missed some private joke. My sister Melissa laughed too loud at something that wasn't funny. I moved a pea around my plate, pretending to listen. I wasn't sure what was worse, the silence that followed or the noise that tried to cover it. Then my dad looked up. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "You don't belong here, Megan, not anymore." I felt the words before I heard them, like a door slamming somewhere deep inside me. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. The laughter stopped. Even the music from the small band in the corner faded. Melissa lowered her glass, her face blank. Lena's smile stayed, but her eyes brightened, sharp as broken glass. My dad leaned back in his chair. "You've made your choices," he said. "You're no longer part of this family." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat burned, but I kept my back straight. Lena reached over, touching his arm as if to calm him, though I saw the satisfaction flicker across her face. Then she nodded toward the door. A man in a dark suit stepped forward from the corner. He wasn't one of the staff. His shoes were polished, his stance military straight. He said my name like it was an order. "Ms. Smith, you'll need to come with me." The room tilted for a second, the chandelier's light spinning across silver and glass. Melissa looked down at her phone, pretending not to see. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. I didn't say a word. The man gestured toward the hallway. The guests murmured softly, avoiding my eyes. I walked past my dad without looking at him. The last thing I saw before stepping out was Lena's faint smile. It wasn't wide, just enough to let me know this moment had been planned. Outside the dining room, the air felt colder. The house that used to smell like Christmas and cinnamon now smelled like lemon polish and control. The man escorted me to the front door, opened it, and waited. I stepped into the night. The sound of the door closing behind me was quiet, almost kind. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. Something else had taken its place. Clarity. It was strange how peace can look like destruction when you've lived in chaos long enough. I stood in the driveway for a moment, the winter air biting at my skin. The lights from the house glowed behind the frosted windows, all golden and soft like a lie that still believed in itself. I looked at my car parked under the oak tree and thought about every time I'd driven here hoping things would be different, hoping maybe Dad would see me, really see me. Maybe Melissa would ask how my week was instead of talking about herself. Maybe Lena would drop the act. Hope had kept me walking through those doors for years. But tonight, something else walked out with me. By the time I reached my car, the shaking had stopped. I opened the door, sat down, and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My makeup was still perfect. I almost laughed at that. The last time I'd looked into that mirror, I'd been nervous about saying the wrong thing. Tonight, I had nothing left to say. I started the engine. The tires crunched over gravel as I pulled away, headlights cutting through the fog. The estate disappeared in the mirror behind me, smaller with every turn. I didn't look back. Halfway down the highway, I realized I hadn't cried. The tears stayed somewhere behind my ribs, locked away like everything else I'd learned to hide. My phone buzzed once on the passenger seat. I didn't pick it up. I knew the kind of messages that came after a scene like that. The polite ones. "Sorry you feel that way." I turned off the sound. The road stretched ahead, empty, quiet, endless. I pressed the accelerator a little harder, watching the speedometer climb. The rhythm of the tires against the asphalt was steady, soothing. When I reached Austin, the city lights felt like another world. My apartment overlooked the river, all glass and quiet elegance. I parked, stepped inside, and kicked off my heels by the door. The silence here wasn't heavy, it was honest. I hung my coat, then walked straight to my office. The screens on my desk glowed, faintly waiting. I pressed a key, and my entire other life came alive. Charts, numbers, live data streams, my world. The one no one at that dinner table knew existed. I leaned forward and opened the main dashboard. The logo glowed in the corner of the screen. Blue Harbor Logistics. I watched the numbers climb, the orders move, the shipments track across the map. 8 years of building in silence. 8 years of being underestimated. 8 years of becoming the ghost they couldn't see. I smiled for the first time that night. I thought about what my dad had said. "You're no longer part of this family." He was right, just not in the way he thought. I walked to the window and looked out at the city below. The skyline shimmered with possibility. Somewhere behind me, the computer hummed, steady as a heartbeat. I thought of the dinner table again, the way the silverware clinked, the way no one looked at me when I stood. They'd wanted me gone because they didn't know what to do with someone they couldn't control. They'd mistaken silence for weakness. That was their first mistake. My phone buzzed again. I finally picked it up. A message from Lena. Short. It read, "You could have handled that better." I stared at it, the audacity of her tone almost funny. I typed back one sentence. "You'll see soon enough how I handle things." Then I deleted it without sending. I didn't need to explain myself. Not anymore. I turned back to the desk, opened another file labeled Personal Holdings, and began checking each account. The Smith Family Trust appeared near the bottom, connected through shell companies they thought belonged to anonymous investors. They had no idea I was the investor. I ran a finger along the list of balances. Every number they depended on had my fingerprint. I wasn't going to take anything yet, not tonight. I wanted them to sleep soundly unaware. Let them wake to the sound of their world cracking open later. I poured a glass of water and stood by the window again. The city moved beneath me, alive and oblivious. People on their way home, lights flickering in apartments, laughter drifting from balconies. Normal life. The kind I used to wish for when I was still trying to belong to a family that didn't want me. Now I understood something I hadn't before. Belonging isn't given, it's built. When the clock on the wall struck midnight, I shut the laptop and turned off the lights. The reflection in the glass showed a woman who didn't look broken, just done pretending. My heart was calm steady. There will be time for decisions tomorrow. Tonight, I would let the silence finish its work. I walked to the bedroom, slipped off my jewelry, and sat on the edge of the bed. The phone buzzed one last time. Melissa's name lit up the screen. I almost answered. Almost. Instead, I pressed decline and let it go dark again. They'd chosen their peace. Now I was choosing mine. The hum of the city filled the room. I lay back against the pillows, eyes open, mind clear. I didn't dream about them that night. I didn't need to. The next morning would take care of itself. The morning light cut through the blinds before I even opened my eyes. It felt softer than usual, like the city itself was holding its breath. For a moment, I just lay there listening to the quiet hum of Austin waking up. No messages from family. No guilt waiting in my inbox. Only silence. It should have felt empty, but it didn't. It felt earned. I got up, pulled on a sweatshirt, and walked barefoot to the kitchen. The coffee machine whirred to life. The smell filled the apartment, warm and steady. For the first time in a long time, I didn't flinch when my phone buzzed. It wasn't my dad or Lena. It was Rachel, my assistant. Her text was simple. "We need to talk. It's about trust accounts." My pulse slowed, not sped up. I had been waiting for that line to appear one day. By the time I got to my office downtown, the sun was higher, throwing streaks of gold across the glass. The receptionist nodded as I passed her, eyes full of quiet respect. She didn't know my story, only my name, and that was enough. Inside the hum of computers, the low chatter of my staff, the smell of paper and ambition, it grounded me. I wasn't someone's daughter here. I wasn't the problem child, I was the CEO. I walked into my corner office, closed the door, and called Rachel. She picked up on the first ring. "It's all starting to move," she said. "Transfers, subtle ones, but not random. Someone's shifting small amounts out of the trust. It looks like they're rerouting assets into new shells." My fingers drummed on the desk. "How much? Hard to say yet, but it's organized. They think they're being discreet." I looked at the skyline, the glass towers reflecting morning light. I knew exactly who it was. Lena was too proud to do the paperwork herself. It would be Melissa. She always did the dirty work and called it helping. "Send me everything," I said. "I want full documentation. Every timestamp, every recipient, every IP log." Rachel hesitated. "Megan, do you want to stop them or just watch for now?" The question hung between us. I could hear traffic far below a car horn, the faint pulse of a city that didn't care about family wars. For now, I said we watch. After the call, I walked to the window and let the view fill my head. The skyscrapers looked sharp against the pale blue sky. When I first started Blue Harbor, I used to dream of this view, a skyline that felt like proof I'd made it out. Now it just looked like a chessboard. Every move had a consequence, every delay a price. I thought of my dad sitting at that table, so sure he still held the power. He didn't know that the ground beneath him had already shifted. The sound of the elevator dinged, pulling me out of the thought. A knock followed. Rachel stepped in, tablet in hand, dark hair pulled back tight. She looked at me the way she always did when something serious was about to unfold. "It's worse than I thought," she said, setting the tablet on the desk. "Look here." She scrolled through lines of data. Each transaction was small, but together they painted a clear picture. They're consolidating. Lena's using the family attorney to create a new holding company under Melissa's name. They're pulling everything that's technically shared. Shared. The word tasted bitter. I had funded more than half those accounts years ago when the family restaurant nearly collapsed. I saved them and they called it shared. Rachel looked up. You want me to freeze it now? Not yet, I said. Let them finish their little performance. They're setting the stage, and I'd rather take it down when the curtain rises. Rachel nodded. Understood. She turned to leave, then paused. There's a message, too, from your dad. He sent it to the legal inbox by accident, I think. She handed me her phone. I read it once, twice. He'd written, "Keep Megan out of this. She doesn't understand how legacy works." My chest tightened, then steadied. I handed the phone back. He's right about one thing, I said. I don't understand how legacy works when it's built on deceit. After Rachel left, I sat in silence for a long time. The city outside kept moving, oblivious to the small wars happening in offices like mine. I opened the old folder still sitting on the corner of my desk, the one labeled "In Case of War." Inside were copies of documents no one in that family knew existed. Ownership certificates, transfer receipts, contracts with my signature as the silent guarantor. It wasn't revenge I felt as I looked at them. It was recognition. I had built an empire they depended on, without ever knowing they were standing on my foundation. My phone buzzed again, this time with an email alert. Subject line: Family Strategic Meeting. The irony made me laugh out loud. I clicked it open. It was from Lena's assistant, sent to a long list of relatives. Saturday at noon, same estate, dress code business casual. My name wasn't in this reading, but it was on the list. An invitation sent out of habit or mistake. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the message. They were really doing it again. Pretending the storm never happened, pretending I'd show up to play my part. For a moment, I wondered what would happen if I did go. If I walked back into that room and watched their faces when they realized the accounts they were fighting over were already under my control. But that would be too easy. Too loud. The better revenge was silence. I deleted the email and opened another window on my screen. The dashboard for Blue Harbor blinked clean and steady. I clicked through the financial layers until I reached the substructure that held the Smith assets. My lawyer once called it a firewall of compassion. I called it insurance. I highlighted the accounts marked under their initials, then hovered over the control panel. There was a single option I hadn't touched since the day we created it. Lock authority pending. I didn't press it, not yet. I wanted to see how far they'd go. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings. Clients' quarterly reviews, performance metrics. The rhythm of competence kept me grounded. But underneath every conversation was a pulse, a quiet hum of anticipation. I could almost feel the walls closing around my dad's empire, not from outside pressure, but from the weight of their own greed. When evening fell, I drove home with the windows down. The air smelled like rain. The sky over the city was streaked in violet and gold. I parked, walked up to my apartment, and dropped my keys on the counter. The screens in my office were still on lines of data glowing in the dark. I sat down, opened my laptop again, and pulled up a private message draft. Rachel, I typed, began the surveillance protocol. Log every movement tied to the Smith Trust. No interference until instructed. Confirm. I hesitated, then added one more line. It's time to prepare the lock. I hit send, closed the laptop, and leaned back. The sound of rain started against the windows, steady and low. I thought of my mom's old voice saying peace is more important than pride, but she never understood that silence wasn't peace, it was permission. And I was done giving it. I turned off the light and sat in the dark for a while, watching lightning flicker across the skyline, each flash reflected in the glass, doubling my reflection. Two versions of me, the one they dismissed and the one they created by doing so. I smiled faintly at the thought. The storm outside was just beginning, but mine had already started. By Thursday morning, the emails started multiplying. Notices, alerts, family chatter dressed up as professionalism. I skimmed through them as the espresso machine hissed behind me. There was a thread titled Quarterly Planning Update, sent from Melissa's assistant, copied to half the family. The subject line made me pause. Review of strategic transitions. I opened it and scanned the first few lines. They were calling another meeting, a smaller one this time, at the Quinlan estate. My name wasn't mentioned, not even as a courtesy. But attached at the bottom was a document marked with my initials in the metadata. They had copied and repurposed one of my financial models. I stared at the screen until my reflection blurred in the glass. For years, they had treated my work like background noise. Now they were dressing it up as their own. The phone rang once, sharp against the quiet. Rachel's voice filled the room. They're moving faster than we thought. I just got the audit reports from the family accounts. The transfers have doubled since yesterday. I turned toward the window, the city outside painted in soft gold light. Where is it going, I asked. Through a secondary firm, she said, and it's disguised under a charitable branch. Guess who filed it? Lena's name flickered in my mind like a warning light. I took a slow breath. They're setting up a false trust, I said. She exhaled. It looks that way. You want me to stop them? No, I said quietly. Not yet. Let them think I'm still in the dark. After the call, I poured the coffee and leaned against the counter. The steam fogged the window beside me. I watched it fade, thinking about how much of my life had been built around the illusion of waiting. Waiting to be seen, to be valued, to be invited back in. But waiting was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. I grabbed my bag and left for the office. The elevator ride up felt longer than usual. My reflection in the mirror panel looked different, sharper maybe. Or maybe I was finally seeing the part of myself that had been hiding behind obligation. When I stepped into the office, Rachel was already there with a stack of files and a look that told me things were about to change. She slid a folder across the table. You need to see this. Inside were copies of internal emails from the family's attorney. Mr. Rudd was advising Lena and Melissa on how to reclassify assets connected to Blue Harbor's parent shell. They were trying to take legal control of something they didn't even know I owned. I flipped through the pages, feeling my pulse steady instead of racing. They're moving against you, Rachel said softly. I know, I replied. That's what makes this part so useful. She looked confused. I smiled. They're showing their entire strategy before the fight begins. Every lawyer, every contact, every account, I'm not going to stop them. I'm going to document them. I'll need every transaction traced and timestamped. Rachel nodded already, reaching for her phone. The rest of the morning blurred into a rhythm of preparation. Phone calls, encrypted emails, signatures. I authorized background tracking on all subsidiary accounts, linking every withdrawal to its digital fingerprint. My legal team worked quietly. Their loyalty solidified years ago when I'd pulled them from smaller firms and built careers under Blue Harbor's shadow. By noon, the system was live. Every move Lena or Melissa made would mirror back to me in real time. At 1:30, I received another email. Subject line: family meeting agenda. No greeting, no explanation, just a list of bullet points. Strategic realignment, legacy consolidation, trust transfer. The words were sharp, deliberate, carefully chosen to sound legitimate. My name wasn't anywhere on it. They weren't even pretending anymore. For a second, I felt a sting not of betrayal, but of recognition. They were still trying to write me out. They still didn't understand that the story no longer belonged to them. That afternoon, I drove out to the edge of the city. The old Quinlan estate sat behind black iron gates, a monument to pride disguised as heritage. I didn't go inside. I parked across the road far enough to watch unnoticed. Cars came and went, familiar license plates gleaming under the sunlight. Melissa arrived last, her white SUV rolling to a stop near the front steps. She stepped out, adjusting her blazer, her expression already set in that polished calm she used when she wanted approval. She looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was just standing too far away to care. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Rachel again. They're transferring again. This time from the estate account, direct to a new offshore line. I glanced at the house through the windshield. Let it happen, I said. Record everything. I'll handle the rest later. As I drove back toward Austin, the highway stretched out in long silver lines. The sun dipped behind the hills, turning everything copper. I thought about all the times I'd sat at that same table they were gathering around now. The small talk, the way Dad's voice filled the room like a sermon. He'd always talked about family as if it were a business he owned. Maybe it was, but not anymore. When I got home, I went straight to my study. The lights from the city shimmered on the surface of my desk. I opened my laptop and logged into the primary Blue Harbor network. A password prompt appeared, followed by 2 layers of encryption. Once inside, I pulled up the internal account registry. Every family asset was tied in one way or another to my infrastructure. Logistics, shipping, fulfillment. They'd built their illusion on top of my reality. I highlighted the key files, exported duplicates, and labeled them Phase 1. I heard thunder rolling outside, faint but steady. The sound filled the apartment like a drumbeat. It made me think of the night I'd first filed Blue Harbor's incorporation papers. Back then I'd been terrified. A girl in her 20s with no money, no support, just an idea and too much stubbornness to quit. Every bank had said no. Every investor smiled politely and walked away. My dad had laughed when I told him I'd start my own firm. He said business wasn't for dreamers, but it was the dreamers who built the empires that people like him inherited. I closed the folder, sat back, and looked at the city again. The thunder was closer now, rain smudging the skyline into streaks of silver and gray. I picked up my phone and scrolled through old photos without meaning to. There was one from Christmas years ago, Melissa and me standing by the tree. She had her arm around me, both of us smiling. I couldn't remember if it was real or if we'd just been told to pose that way. I deleted the picture and locked the screen. Some memories only live if you feed them. The rain hit harder, tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. I turned off the lights and let the room stay dark. The glow from the monitors cast long reflections on the glass. I thought about what Rachel had asked earlier. Do you want to stop them or just watch? The answer has changed now. Watching wasn't enough. The moment they filed that new holding company, they turned this into war. They just didn't know they were fighting on my battlefield. I opened one more window on my screen and typed the command for trace. Authorization. A small box appeared asking for confirmation. I entered the code and pressed enter. The system hummed to life, mapping every thread of data that touched the Smith Trust. Dots and lines spread across the screen, connecting accounts, offshore routes, names. It was beautiful in a way only order can be after chaos. I took a deep breath and whispered to the empty room, let them keep digging. The deeper they go, the easier it will be to bury them in their own lies. The rain softened again, and for the first time that week, I felt calm. I wasn't angry anymore, just certain. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning, thick envelope, cream paper, no return address. My name was written in careful cursive that looked like it belonged to another century. I knew the handwriting before I even opened it. My mom's. The last time she'd written me anything was a birthday card 6 years ago that said, "We love you, but please understand your dad's position." I turned the envelope in my hands, studying the seal like it might change the message inside. The coffee beside me had gone cold by the time I finally broke it open. Inside was a single invitation printed on formal cardstock. Family strategic meeting. My presence was requested. Requested, not welcomed. The words were so polite they almost hid their meaning. It would be held at the Quinlan estate, the same place they'd humiliated me. Dress business casual. It was the kind of message that pretended to be professional but smelled like control. At the bottom, a handwritten note in my mom's looping script. Be calm, Megan, don't cause trouble this time. I stared at the line until the letters blurred. Trouble. That's what they called it when I told the truth. I folded the paper carefully and slid it back into the envelope. The sound of the paper sliding against itself reminded me of the Christmas card Lena once sent me with a photo of the whole family smiling in matching sweaters. She'd written a single line at the bottom. Hope you find peace in Austin. As if exile was a form of kindness. I set the envelope down and walked to the window. The city was alive beneath me, a quiet pulse of motion. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, then faded. The meeting would happen whether I went or not. But something in me wanted to see their faces again, not out of longing, out of certainty. They had built their little fortress of pretense for years, feeding on the belief that I'd stay away. Maybe it was time to remind them who built the ground they stood on. That evening, I drove to my lawyer's office. Jacob had been with me since the early days of Blue Harbor, back when I could barely afford to pay him. He looked up from his desk when I walked in. You got the letter, he said. I nodded and dropped it on his desk. He read it once and frowned. They're getting bolder. Or desperate. He slid the paper back toward me. You're not going right. I sat down across from him and smiled. I didn't say I wasn't. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. Megan, these meetings are traps. They'll try to bait you, make you react, record it, spin it, I know. That's why I'm not going unprepared. He studied me for a moment, then opened his drawer and pulled out a small folder. I was hoping you'd say that. Inside were legal drafts labeled Contingency Ownership and Silent Benefactor. I glanced at the titles, feeling the weight of years condensed into paperwork. He said quietly, You know you don't have to prove anything to them anymore. I do, I said, but not the way they think. When I left the office, the air outside was crisp and sharp. The sun was setting behind the buildings, painting everything in copper light. I walked to my car, the city buzzing with life around me, but my mind was already miles away, picturing the long oak table, the smell of lemon polish, my dad's cold stare. There was a time those memories could make me tremble. Now they only made me plan. That night I stood in front of my closet, staring at rows of suits, each one a version of armor. My fingers brushed over the navy one. It had sharp shoulders, a fitted waist, and quiet authority. I'd worn it once to a board meeting where 12 men twice my age had called me sweetheart before I bought their company out 6 months later. It was the kind of suit that didn't ask for respect. It demanded it. I laid it out on the bed, then sat beside it for a moment, thinking about how strange it felt to be preparing for a family meeting like it was a battle. The next morning, the city woke under gray clouds. I left early, not because I was eager, but because I hated being late to my own reckoning. The Quinlan estate looked the same as the last time I'd seen it. Perfect lawns, iron gates, and entrance that screamed money and silence. I parked near the side, away from the main circle of cars. No one came to greet me. They never did. I walked up the stone path, my heels steady against the wet ground. Inside, the house smelled like furniture polish and tension. A staff member I didn't recognize nodded politely and pointed toward the dining hall. The long table had been rearranged into a boardroom layout. Nameplates gleamed in neat rows, every spot labeled except the one at the far end. A plain card sat there blank. I took it without surprise. Someone had placed a pen beside it, as if inviting me to fill in my own name. I didn't. The emptiness of that card said more than any name could. Melissa was already there, talking animatedly to our uncle about investment opportunities. Her hair was perfectly curled, her tone syrupy. When she saw me, her smile froze for half a second before reforming itself. "Megan." "I didn't think you'd come." I smiled. "You didn't think I'd be invited." She laughed too loudly. "Dad will be happy to see you." I looked around the room. "I doubt that." Lena entered next, dressed in pale beige, every movement deliberate. She carried a folder and a faint perfume that lingered too long. When her eyes met mine, her expression didn't change. "Megan," she said smoothly, "thank you for joining us." Her voice had that practiced calm of someone who enjoys control. I nodded once, polite but detached. Then my dad walked in. John Smith, tall graying, the kind of man who still carried himself like every room was his. He didn't look at me at first. He spoke to the lawyer, to Lena, to Melissa. Only after settling into the head chair did his eyes find mine. "Megan." His voice was flat businesslike. "You received our correspondence." "I did." "And yet you came." He sounded more curious than welcoming. "I wanted to see for myself how legacy meetings look when legacy doesn't belong to you anymore." A flicker passed across his face, something between annoyance and confusion. Lena reached over, placing her hand lightly on his arm. "Let's begin," she said. The lawyer opened a laptop, the clicking of keys loud in the stillness. I scanned the agenda laid out in front of me. My projects were listed under neutral terms, stripped of credit, renamed as shared contributions. Even the logistics system I'd developed had been rebranded as a family initiative. It was a clean theft, efficient, heartless, almost impressive. Halfway through the presentation, my dad started talking about the new direction of the Smith legacy. He used words like unity and tradition, phrases rehearsed to sound noble. I listened quietly, noting each lie, each omission. When he mentioned the restructuring of assets, my hand tightened on the pen beside me. I felt Rachel's words echo in my mind. "They're moving faster than we thought." The lawyer clicked to the next slide. There in plain text was my name under a new label, inactive. The room went still. I looked up and met my dad's eyes. He didn't flinch. Melissa shifted uncomfortably. Lena's smile didn't move. The lawyer kept talking about transfer protocols. The sound of his voice blurred. I thought about the folder in my car, the one labeled "in case of war." I thought about the night I built Blue Harbor out of sleepless ambition and sheer defiance. When the meeting finally adjourned, I stood without a word. My dad said something, maybe a polite dismissal, but I didn't hear it. I walked past him, past Lena's faint perfume, past the rows of polite smiles. Outside, the air hit my face like a reset. The sky had cleared. I could taste rain in the wind. I unlocked my car, slid behind the wheel, and looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't look angry, just awake. As I started the engine, I said it out loud for the first time. "Let's begin." They thought I left that night in shame. They thought I drove away from that meeting defeated, too humiliated to look back. What they didn't know was that I drove home to an empire they'd been living off for years. My company, my money, my silence. Harbor Logistics had started as a dream in a one-bedroom apartment with a flickering lamp and a half-broken laptop. Now it was a network of 42 warehouses, thousands of employees, and a reputation built on precision. The same company that quietly owned the contracts that kept the Smith family trust alive. Every car, every trip, every dinner they paid for traced back to me. The irony tasted almost sweet. I wasn't the girl they disowned. I was the woman who owned them without their knowing. I parked in my building's garage and took the elevator up to my penthouse. The city lights stretched below me, clean and distant. My reflection in the elevator doors didn't look angry anymore. It looked sure. By the time I stepped inside, Rachel was already waiting in my office. She was leaning against my desk, tablet in hand, her dark eyes focused. "You were right," she said before I could ask. "They filed the new trust this morning. Lena and Melissa listed as co-beneficiaries, John as primary executor." "My name isn't on it," I said. She nodded. "Not anywhere. But they've tied it directly to the logistics accounts." I walked to the window, watching the lights of the river flash under the bridge. It always started the same way with them. Quiet theft, disguised as strategy. Rachel hesitated, then said softly, "What do you want to do?" I turned to her, slow and deliberate. I want to take inventory of everything they think belongs to them. She smiled faintly. I've already started. We spent the next 3 hours going through files. Every subsidiary, every investment, every offshore branch. The numbers flickered across the screens like a constellation. All of it connected back to Harbor Logistics, which meant to me. Rachel's voice broke the silence. Do you realize you control nearly 80% of their liquid assets? Glanced up. Not control. Own. There's a difference. She grinned. A dangerous one. After she left, I poured a glass of wine and sat at the desk, staring at the map on my screen. Pins glowed across countries, cities, and ports, each one a place I had built from nothing. It was strange how success could feel invisible when no one believed you were capable of it. My dad had once told me I was too emotional to run a company. He said business required detachment. Maybe he was right, because now I could look at the Smith family's accounts and feel absolutely nothing. I remembered the early days when the first warehouse went live, the smell of concrete and paint, the sound of forklifts echoing through empty space. I'd walked through it in worn sneakers and a thrift store coat, too broke to hire staff, too proud to ask for help. I built it out of spite, out of exhaustion, out of that stubborn refusal to be small. And now that same company was the quiet heartbeat beneath my dad's wealth. The very thing he claimed as legacy had been mine all along. I opened a folder labeled Holdings Structure and scrolled through the files. My name was nowhere visible. Every document listed an alias, every signature buried under layers of corporations. It had been designed that way from the start, not to hide from the law but from them. Back when I still wanted peace, I told myself keeping my distance was protection. Now I saw it for what it really was. Power. At 9 o'clock, I called Jacob. He answered immediately. You're working late, he said. Always, I replied. I sent you something. You're going to like it. He opened the file on his end. A low whistle came through the line. This is meticulous. You're positioned to take everything if you want to. His voice was careful. I don't want everything I said, just what's mine. He was silent for a moment. Then softly he asked, Are you sure you want to do this, Megan? It's not just money, it's blood. I looked out at the skyline. Blood dries, ownership doesn't. After I hung up, I leaned back in my chair. The city spread beneath me like a quiet accomplice. For years I had convinced myself that forgiveness meant freedom. But forgiveness, I realized, was just another kind of waiting. And I was done waiting. Around midnight, the air in the apartment felt still. I stood and walked to the window, pressing my palm against the cool glass. Down below, the traffic lights blinked red, yellow, green, a rhythm that never stopped. I thought about my dad sitting in his study, drinking his expensive whiskey, believing he'd won. I wondered what he would do when he realized the accounts were never really his. The memory of that last dinner came back, the way his voice had cut through laughter, the way everyone had gone silent when he said I wasn't part of the family. I remembered the tightness in my chest, the restraint it took not to speak. That same silence had once been my prison. Now it would be my weapon. I turned on the smaller monitor and opened a secure channel. The system required two-factor authentication, a code only I and one other person knew. Rachel's name appeared on the screen within seconds. She looked half asleep, but alert. Are you sure you want to start the process tonight? I nodded. Phase 1 only. No alerts, no visible changes. Just observation. She typed something quickly. Done. You'll have full visibility by morning. When the call ended, I sat for a long time, listening to the hum of the building around me. Somewhere in another life, I might have picked up the phone and called my dad. I might have asked why. But that version of me didn't exist anymore. The woman sitting in that glass tower didn't beg for explanations. She built consequences. At 2 a.m, I shut down the screens and walked into the living room. The city outside was quiet now, the streets glistening from a light rain. I thought about the people sleeping in their apartments, unaware of the wars that could be fought without a sound. That was the kind of war I understood best. No shouting, no chaos, just precision. Before going to bed, I opened my journal. It was old, the leather cover worn from years of handling. I hadn't written in it since before the family split. My pen hovered over the page for a moment before I began. They think power means control, but real power is choice. Tonight I chose myself. I set the pen down, closed the journal, and turned off the lamp. The room fell into darkness. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft patter of rain, the faint vibration of the city below. It all felt distant, like I was standing on the edge of something larger than myself. I didn't know exactly what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing for certain. The next time they tried to erase me, they'd find their hands empty. At exactly 9:17 that night, I pressed one button, not out of anger, out of clarity. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the servers. Every account tied to the Smith Trust froze within seconds. By 9:18, their credit cards stopped working. By 9:21, their vehicles went inactive. By 9:23, the Smith family holdings were nothing more than data waiting for permission to exist again. I didn't smile. I just sat there watching lines of code turn green on the screen, confirmation after confirmation. It was strange how silence could sound so final. Rachel's voice broke through on the secure line. It's done. Every linked account is restricted. No alerts, no notifications, just locked. She sounded both nervous and exhilarated. I took a slow breath. Good. Keep monitoring for any override attempts. She hesitated, then said quietly, Megan, they're going to realize soon. I know, I replied. That's the point. Outside the window, the city was wrapped in midnight blue. Lights flickered at the towers across the river, small lives continuing, unaware that an empire had just gone still. I stood and walked to the window, feeling the faint vibration under my feet from the generators below. The skyline reflected in the glass fractured, like a mosaic of power that no longer belonged to them. Rachel's message pinged again. First decline confirmed. Estate maintenance payment failed. I could almost picture it. Lena at her vanity trying to schedule another spa day, hearing that polite robotic voice say the transaction declined. Melissa trying to pay for some influencer campaign. My dad called the bank, his irritation rising, unaware that the system he was demanding to speak to belonged to me. By 9:30, the first call came through on my private line. It was Jacob. They're panicking, he said. Your dad tried to reach the bank president. He's furious. Do I respond? No, I said. Let them think it's a glitch. His voice softened. Megan, this will ruin them. I turned from the window. I'm not ruining them, Jacob. I'm releasing myself. After the call ended, I poured a glass of water and sat back down. The air in the room felt different, lighter. My reflection on the screen looked unfamiliar, calm in a way that used to frighten me. The version of me who begged to be understood no longer existed. The one sitting here didn't need permission. Another alert blinked on the monitor. Secondary accounts disabled. The message was clean, clinical. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the reality sink in. For years, I had built this safety net in secret, layer by layer. While they laughed about my obsession with order, they thought it was control. It was protection. From them. A second later, my phone buzzed with a text. My mom. Your dad's card isn't working. Did you do something? Please don't make this worse. I stared at the message. Her words were the same as they'd always been, soft on the surface, heavy with blame underneath. I typed out a reply, then deleted it. There was nothing to explain. She'd watched it all happen year after year and called it family duty. I turned the phone face down and let it buzz again, unanswered. The night stretched on. The servers in the next room whirred steadily, a sound that had always soothed me. I checked the transaction logs one last time. Every file was sealed. Every pathway is secured. For the first time, there were no open channels connecting me to them. It was finished. I leaned back in my chair, remembering the first time I'd learned how to write a simple piece of code that could stop a system from crashing. It felt like magic. Back then, I didn't know that someday I'd use the same skill to freeze something far bigger. Something that wasn't supposed to be mine, but always had been. Around 10, Rachel called again. They're still trying, she said. Multiple failed attempts to reset passwords. Melissa called the bank 3 times. Lena contacted legal support. Even your dad reached out to the estate manager. All lines lead back to you. I took another sip of water. Keep documenting everything. I want a full report in the morning. She hesitated. Megan, how does it feel? I looked around the office. The city lights shimmered on the polished floor. Somewhere below, a train passed its sound faint and distant. It feels quiet, I said. Finally quiet. When the line disconnected, I turned off the overhead light. The glow from the monitors was enough. It painted the room in soft blue, a reflection of control made visible. I thought of my dad's words that night at the dinner table. You're no longer part of this family. He had no idea how true that was. At 11, I opened a new file labeled Contingency Protocol. Inside were instructions for the next phase. The first was simple monitor. The second hold. The third wait. I checked every line twice, then closed the folder. There was no rush now. Revenge wasn't about chaos. It was about patience. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail from Melissa. Her voice was trembling. Megan, please, I don't know what's happening. Dad is furious. Mom's crying. Lena keeps saying we'll fix it, but no one knows how. Can you call me? I sat still, listening to the desperation I'd never heard from her before. It should have felt satisfying. It didn't. It just felt inevitable. I didn't delete the voicemail, I saved it. A record of what happens when lies collapse under their own weight. Then I stood and walked to the window again. The city was changing color now, the deep blue giving way to black. My reflection looked sharper, my face half in light, half in shadow. I whispered to it not as a declaration, but as acknowledgement. You taught me silence, now live with it. Down below the river moved slow and steady, catching the light from the bridges. I could almost hear my dad's voice in my head, the way he used to lecture about responsibility and legacy. Legacy, he said once, is what you leave behind when you die. Maybe he was right. Tonight, I had left behind obedience, and in its place I'd found something better. When the clock struck midnight, the systems refreshed automatically. I watched as the final confirmation appeared. All accounts remain inactive. No overrides detected, status stable. I exhaled slowly. For the first time in years, there was nothing left to fix. I shut the laptop, stood, and turned off the servers one by one. The hum faded until the room was silent. Outside, a faint drizzle began drops streaking down the glass. I pressed my hand to the window, feeling the cold from the rain seep through. Somewhere out there, my family was waking up to find their world frozen. Somewhere inside me, something unfroze in return. I left the office lights off as I walked toward the kitchen. The refrigerator door clicked softly when it opened. I poured another glass of water and leaned against the counter, letting the quiet settle like dust. It wasn't triumph that filled me. It was released. They had spent years teaching me how to be silent. Now silence belonged to me. The clock on the wall read 12:20. The rain had stopped. I finished the water, rinsed the glass, and set it in the sink. Tomorrow would bring noise, calls, emails, confusion. But tonight the world was finally still. I turned off the last light and walked toward the bedroom. The city outside glowed faintly, unaware that somewhere in its heart, a dynasty had just collapsed without a sound. The phone started vibrating before sunrise. 37 missed calls. 16 voicemails, 12 text messages, all from familiar names I hadn't seen on my screen in years. My dad, Lena, Melissa, even my mom. I didn't answer any of them. The sound of silence after their desperation was almost symphonic. I made coffee, opened the balcony doors, and let the early wind sweep through the apartment. The city below was still half asleep, the skyline brushed in soft gray light. I sat down with my mug and watched the morning unfold, calm, steady, certain. For years they had controlled every conversation. Now their words had nowhere left to land. The first message I finally opened wasn't from them, but from Rachel. Update: all accounts remain frozen, public traces are clean, no leaks. She added one line that made me smile. They're finally realizing who owned the floor under their feet. I typed back a single word. Good. By 8, the inevitable began. The phone rang again. Jacob this time. You've made the news, he said without greeting. Local coverage at first. Then national finance outlets picked it up. They're calling you the silent architect. I could hear the faint disbelief in his voice. It wasn't judgment. It was awesome. I asked him if the report was accurate. He said yes. The phrasing was poetic. A quiet billionaire withdraws support from family trust, resulting in total freeze of Quinlan and Smith assets. You wanted clarity. Now you have it? I leaned back in my chair, letting his words sink in. Quiet billionaire. That title felt foreign, almost detached from the girl who once sat at family dinners pretending not to exist. I asked, how bad is it for them? He sighed. Bad enough that they'll call it betrayal. Good enough that you're protected. You're untouchable now. I thanked him, ended the call, and opened my laptop. The front page of this business journal confirmed what he'd said. My name wasn't printed directly, but the initials were there, MS. Anonymous benefactor and founder of Harbor Logistics. A photo of my dad accompanied the article. He looked smaller than I remembered, standing on the estate steps with reporters swarming. The caption beneath it read, Smith patriarch faces financial investigation following corporate dependency, exposure. I exhaled slowly. The truth was public now. I didn't have to hide behind my own restraint anymore. The next few hours blurred into a rhythm of unanswered calls. Each one came with its own kind of irony. Melissa's voice trembled in her voicemail. Dad is losing it, Megan. He keeps saying you've destroyed the family. Please, can you fix this? I saved it without replying. The second was Lena's. Her tone was sweet, careful, rehearsed. Megan, this isn't what your mom would want. We can talk about restructuring. You don't have to humiliate us. I let that one play to the end, then deleted it. The third was my dad. He didn't yell. He didn't beg. He simply said, You've made your point. I hope you're proud. I let the message sit in my inbox unread, like a monument to every dismissal he'd ever given me. At noon, Rachel called again. It's spreading. The networks picked up the story. They're digging into harbor logistics, but the shell structures are airtight. No one can trace you beyond the press nickname. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. Keep it that way. After we hung up, I stepped outside again. The sun was high now, cutting across the balcony rail. I could hear the faint hum of traffic and laughter from the cafe downstairs. Normal sounds in a day that wasn't normal at all. For the first time in my life, I felt the full quiet of independence. It wasn't peaceful exactly, it was ownership of silence. In the afternoon, Jacob sent a copy of a press release from the family's attorney. It was filled with the usual legal politeness, acknowledgement of recent restructuring, commitment to transparency, assurance to investors. I laughed quietly. They were pretending it was all strategic, not survival. I closed my laptop and went for a walk through the city. The streets were alive with ordinary life. People carrying groceries, kids chasing pigeons, an old man feeding crumbs to ducks by the fountain. The simplicity of it grounded me. My world had always been made of contracts and boardrooms, but walking among strangers reminded me what I had fought for. Not revenge, autonomy. By the time I returned home, the sun was setting, painting the buildings in amber. I poured a glass of red wine and sat by the window. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A familiar voice came through, quiet and strained. "Megan, it's Mom." I stayed silent. She took a breath. "I don't understand what's happening. Your dad is beside himself. The house feels like a ghost town. Please talk to me." For a moment, I almost softened. Then I remembered every dinner where she sat and watched while they belittled me. Every time she whispered afterward, "Just ignore him, he means well." I spoke, finally, my voice even. "You watched me disappear for years. Now it's your turn." The line went quiet. Then a click. I didn't feel guilty. Only completion. Later that evening, Rachel texted again. "You might want to see this." She sent a link to a live stream from a local news channel. The footage showed my dad standing outside the estate, reporters pressing microphones toward him. He said, "My daughter's actions have been deeply hurtful, but we remain a family. We hope for reconciliation." His words were calm, but his hands trembled. The reporter asked if he planned to take legal action. He hesitated, then said, "No comment." Behind him, Lena and Melissa stood frozen, smiling for the cameras, faces tight with embarrassment. Watching it felt surreal. The same people who had erased me now had to speak my name publicly to explain their downfall. I closed the tab and shut the laptop. Enough. As night fell, I lit a candle on the coffee table. The small flame flickered against the window's reflection. My apartment felt warmer than usual, filled with a strange mixture of exhaustion and clarity. I opened my journal again and wrote a single line. "The louder they panic, the quieter I become." The rest of the night passed in fragments. A glass of wine half finished. The sound of rain against the balcony, the faint buzz of distant traffic. When my phone buzzed again around midnight, I almost ignored it. But the message preview caught my eye. It was from my dad, just 3 words. "We need you." I didn't open it. I let it stay there, glowing faintly on the screen before fading into darkness. Maybe he really believed it. Maybe he finally understood what those words meant. But I had spent too many years needing them. That debt was paid. I walked to the window one last time. The rain had stopped. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement below. My reflection in the glass looked softer now, not triumphant, not bitter, just whole. The war was no longer about revenge, it was about truth. And the truth had finally spoken for itself. By the 3rd morning, the storm had settled into something colder. No more phone calls, no more shouting voicemails, just silence. The kind that follows when people finally understand the damage is permanent. I sat by the window with my coffee, watching the sunlight crawl across the hardwood floor. The city outside moved like nothing had happened, but my name was still on every financial headline. "Quiet billionaire severs family empire." The phrase had been repeated so many times it no longer sounded like news. It sounded like a definition. I had become a headline, a lesson, maybe even a warning. For them, it was the end. For me, it was the beginning of something new. Rachel called just as I was finishing breakfast. "They're still trying to negotiate through intermediaries," she said. "A family friend reached out to one of our holding companies, pretending to inquire about reinstatement." I let her talk, her voice crisp and efficient. She'd always been good at separating facts from emotions. I asked if there was any legal exposure. "None," she said. "You're fully insulated. Every transaction you made was documented. You didn't steal from them. You just stopped feeding them." That line stayed with me long after the call ended. I didn't steal from them. I stopped feeding them. For years, I had mistaken generosity for love, silence for peace. I had built bridges no one deserved to cross. Now those bridges were gone, and I didn't miss them. By noon, the story had shifted from finance to family. A talk show host read snippets of online comments. Half the viewers called me heartless. The other half called me brave. They didn't know the years that came before this. The nights spent sitting outside family dinners while laughter came from behind a closed door. They only saw the outcome, not the bruises that made it necessary. Later that afternoon, I drove out of the city. The highway was empty, a straight line of sunlit asphalt stretching toward the hills. I didn't have a destination, I just needed distance. With every mile, the weight in my chest loosened. Somewhere between Austin and Waco, I stopped at a small roadside diner. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes, poured me coffee without asking. "Long day, honey," she said. "Long year," I answered. She smiled softly. "It gets better. It always does." Her words were simple, but they landed deeper than she knew. I left a generous tip and sat in the car for a while watching the horizon. Maybe this was what healing looked like. Not joy, not triumph, just space to breathe again. My phone buzzed once. An email from my attorney. Subject line, request for mediation. It came from the family's lawyer. Polite, formal, predictable. They wanted to meet off the record to discuss potential reconciliation. I laughed under my breath. They still thought everything could be solved with negotiation, as if morality were a contract clause. I forwarded it to Jacob with a note. Decline. No response necessary. The next morning I brought a letter. Handwritten, this time no signature on the envelope. Just my name in neat cursive. I recognized the handwriting immediately. My mom. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside a single page. "Megan, I know you believe we deserve this. Maybe we do. But please remember we are still family. Your dad isn't well. Melissa is frightened. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive us before it's too late." I read it twice. There was no apology, only guilt packaged as concern. Still, I folded it carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. Maybe one day I would read it again when the ache didn't feel like betrayal. That night I couldn't sleep. The city outside was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the window. The rain had started again, soft and rhythmic. Somewhere out there, they were still trying to make sense of a world that had stopped bending around them. And somewhere in that same world, I was finally standing on my own ground. In the days that followed, small details reached me through Rachel and Jacob. The estate had listed several properties for sale. Melissa's influencer deal had been canceled. Lena's social club membership had been suspended due to unpaid dues. My dad had stopped appearing in public. Each update arrived like a ripple in still water. I didn't ask for them, but I didn't stop them either. I wanted to know, not out of cruelty, but closure. One evening, Jacob called. "They've sent another message," he said. "This one from your sister directly." I told him to forward it. When I opened it, the subject line read, "We were wrong." The message was long, rambling, emotional. She wrote about our childhood, about how she envied me even as she mocked me, about how Dad had always seen me as competition, not as a daughter, about Lena whispering poison disguised as advice. "I don't expect you to forgive us," she wrote, "but I hope someday you understand I was just trying to survive in that house, too." For the first time since this began, I felt something close to compassion. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. I replied with one sentence: "Survival doesn't excuse cruelty." Then I closed my laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. The following week, a news alert appeared on my phone. The Smith estate had filed for restructuring, citing health-related leadership withdrawal. My dad was stepping down. Lena was nowhere in the statement. It was as if she had disappeared. I stared at the headline, feeling nothing. They had built a world of power and control. Now it was dust. That weekend, I visited one of our smaller facilities near the river. The air smelled of cedar and oil, the sound of machines steady and reliable. The manager, a woman named Claire, greeted me with a wide smile. "You don't usually come out here," she said. I told her I needed to see something that still worked. She laughed. "Well, this place runs because you built it right." Her words stayed with me as I walked through the warehouse. Everything here moved with purpose. Pallets, forklifts, workers in bright vests. No one here cared about my last name. They cared about results. That was the difference. This world was built on earned respect, not inherited entitlement. Driving home that evening, the sun dipped low behind the skyline, turning the water gold. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who begged for belonging. She would have called this revenge. The woman behind the wheel now knew better. It was liberation. When I pulled into the garage, the dashboard clock read 7:30. I turned off the engine and sat for a while, listening to the faint hum of the city. The silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. I took a deep breath and whispered the truth to myself. I didn't lose them. I just stopped chasing people who never looked back. The letter arrived without warning. No postmark, no return address. Just a cream envelope slipped under my office door sometime before dawn. My name was written in ink so faint it almost looked like it was apologizing for existing. For a moment, I thought it might be another legal notice, another attempt to lure me into a conversation disguised as reconciliation. But when I opened it, the handwriting stopped me. My dad's. The first line read, "Megan, I don't know where to begin." I sat back in my chair, staring at the words like they belonged to someone else. For years, he'd spoken to me only through orders, directives, dismissals. Now his pen trembled across the page like a confession. He wrote that the family had fallen apart since the accounts were locked, that Lena had left quietly after the press turned against them, that Melissa barely spoke to anyone, that the estate felt empty without the hum of activity that money used to hide. He said he didn't blame me, not entirely. He just didn't know how to live in a world he no longer controlled. He ended the letter with a line I never expected to read. "You were right." I folded the page and placed it on the desk. For a long time, I couldn't move. Those 3 words felt heavier than any fortune I had ever built. Later that morning, Jacob called. He sounded cautious, like he already knew something had changed. "Your dad's health has been mentioned in a few reports," he said. "Mild heart episode, nothing fatal. He's resting now. The public story is that stress did it." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Stress," I said softly. "The kind he created, or the kind he earned?" Jacob didn't answer. When I hung up, I walked to the window. The city was awake, cars moving like veins through the streets below. Somewhere in that pulse was the version of me that used to crave their approval. I thought about the last time I saw my dad, the way he'd looked at me like a stranger he couldn't quite place. I wondered if somewhere inside that proud man, there had ever been space for love that didn't come with conditions. By noon, I found myself driving without destination again. The freeway stretched open ahead, the sky clear and hard blue. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than they needed to. Every song on the radio felt like it belonged to another life. After an hour, I pulled off near a quiet town I hadn't visited since college. There was a small park there, the kind with benches worn smooth by time. I sat under a maple tree, the smell of grass sharp in the air. For the first time in weeks, I let myself feel something other than control. I remembered being 19, sitting in this same spot, dreaming of building something no one could take from me. Back then, I thought success would heal everything. That money would make love easier, that achievement would force respect. But sitting there now, I realized success only amplifies who people already are. My dad's pride had grown louder. My silence had grown stronger. A soft voice broke my thoughts. "Miss, are you all right?" I looked up. A man in his 60s stood nearby, holding a leash with a small dog tugging at the end. I smiled faintly. "Just thinking," I said. He nodded. "That's a dangerous habit." Then he smiled and walked on his dog, trotting happily ahead. When I drove back into the city that evening, the streets were glowing with the first hints of sunset. The light bounced off the buildings like gold against glass. My apartment felt colder than usual when I walked in. The envelope still sat on my desk open, my dad's handwriting curling across the page. I read it again, slower this time. "You were right." I wanted to feel vindicated, triumphant even, but what I felt instead was something quieter. Maybe regret, maybe release. Those words weren't an apology, they had an ending. The following morning, Rachel stopped by with a folder in her hand. "You're going to want to see this," she said. Inside were printouts from an industry publication, an article about a new women-led startup fund making waves across the state. The source of the funding wasn't disclosed, but Rachel smiled when she handed it to me. "I can keep a secret when it matters." I laughed softly. "Good. Let it stay that way." We sat in silence for a moment, both of us looking out at the skyline. She asked finally, "Do you ever miss them?" I thought about it. The house, the dinners, the illusion of family. Then I shook my head. I miss who I wanted them to be, not who they were. After she left, I opened my journal again. The last entry still lingered from the night I froze the accounts. Tonight I added new words beneath it. Sometimes peace isn't found in forgiveness. Sometimes it's found in the distance. I closed the cover and ran my hand over the worn leather. That evening, I walked down to the pier near my building. The air smelled of salt and metal, the water shifting gently against the docks. The world felt slower here. I watched the boats come in, their lights bobbing on the surface. A family walked past me, parents laughing with their young daughter. For a moment, I wondered if that kind of simple love ever could have existed for us. Maybe in another lifetime, one without ambition or pride. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Melissa. "Dad's in the hospital. He keeps asking for you." I stared at it, the glow of the screen soft against the dark. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed, "I hope he rests," then erased it. There was nothing left to say. I turned the phone off and slipped it into my pocket. As I stood watching the water, the wind picked up cool against my face. I realized that I no longer felt angry. Not even sad, just done. It wasn't victory I felt, but completion. The story had played itself out, and for once, I wasn't the one still chasing the ending. When I walked back toward the building, the streetlights flickered one by one. The city hummed its familiar rhythm. Somewhere in a hospital room miles away, my dad was coming to terms with a life built on silence. And somewhere within me, the last thread tying me to that silence finally loosened. I took the elevator up to my floor, the ride slow and smooth. When the doors opened, the scent of jasmine from the hallway planter filled the air. I paused at my door for a moment, looking out over the city through the wide glass windows. It was beautiful in its indifference. Inside, I poured a glass of water and sat on the edge of the bed. The night stretched long and soft around me. I thought about how strange it was that peace could feel like absence. No noise, no blame, no need to explain, just stillness. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the room. I woke without an alarm, without the usual sense of urgency. The phone was still off. The world outside continued steady and unbothered. For the first time since I could remember, I didn't feel like a reaction to someone else's story. I felt like an author's of my own. The news came on a quiet Sunday morning. A message from Jacob, short and simple. "Your dad passed early today." No dramatics, no long explanations, just the facts. I read it twice, the words sinking in slowly like cold water spreading through cloth. For years I had imagined this moment. Not his death exactly, but the end of his control over me. And now that it had arrived, I didn't feel anger or sadness. I felt a stillness I couldn't name. I set the phone down beside my coffee, staring at the steam rising from the mug. Outside, the city was waking up, sunlight cutting through the blinds in long stripes of gold. Life continued. It always does. I didn't go to the funeral. I thought about it briefly, then decided some goodbyes were best left unspoken. Melissa sent me a message with the details anyway. The service would be held at the estate chapel, the same place where they'd once celebrated his birthday, the same place where I'd been told I wasn't part of the family. Her message ended with a single line. "Mom hopes you'll come." I didn't reply. Instead, I spent that afternoon at the river. The water moved slowly and heavy, reflecting the sky like a dull mirror. I watched a pair of ducks glide by unbothered, their small wake spreading in neat ripples. For the first time in years, there was no weight pressing on my chest. The war was over, and I had won not by destruction but by distance. Later that week, the estate lawyer contacted Jacob with the final documents. There was nothing left for me to sign or receive. My name wasn't mentioned in the will, but that didn't matter anymore. The world already knew the truth. The fortune he built was only a fraction of what I had created on my own. I didn't need inheritance, I had a legacy. Rachel came by that evening with a bottle of wine. She set it on the counter and looked at me carefully. "You look lighter," she said. I smiled faintly. Maybe because I finally stopped carrying ghosts. We sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. She poured 2 glasses and raised hers slightly. "To survive," she said. I corrected her. "To grow." After she left, I stood on the balcony and looked out at the skyline. The city shimmered like a constellation of second chances. Somewhere out there, 100 women were building their own empires under the fund I had created, quietly in the background. Harbor Foundation for Women in Business. No press, no spotlight, just resources placed where they were needed most. For years I had been invisible. Now invisibility was my strength. The next morning, a letter arrived in the mail. Not typed, but handwritten. I recognized the script before I even opened it. "Melissa." Her words were simple. "I know you won't forgive us. I don't expect you to, but I want you to know I'm trying to be different. I've left the house. I've started over. You were right, again." I folded the paper and slipped it into my journal. Maybe one day when the sting faded, I'd write her back. That evening, I drove to the outskirts of town, to the small startup hub I'd helped finance. It was tucked inside an old converted warehouse, walls painted white, floors polished concrete. The sign above the entrance read quietly, "Harbor Incubator." Inside, the air buzzed with energy. Young women huddled over laptops, sketches pinned to corkboards, ideas blooming everywhere. A young founder, barely 25, approached me nervously. "Ms. Smith, I didn't think you'd visit in person." I smiled. "Just Megan." She relaxed, her shoulders dropping. "I wanted to thank you," she said softly. "None of this would exist without your help." I looked around the room, the faces lit with ambition, the kind of ambition that still believed in possibility. I thought about how far I'd come from that dining room where I was once told to be quiet, to not cause trouble, to let others lead. These women didn't need permission. They just needed an opportunity. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "Build something that's yours," I said. "And when you do, protect it with everything you have." As I left the building, the sky was fading into twilight. The scent of rain hung in the air, and somewhere nearby a train whistle echoed faintly. I walked slowly to my car, the pavement cool beneath my heels. Every part of my life has been defined by leaving something behind. Now for once I felt like I was walking toward something instead. At home, I poured another glass of wine and sat at the kitchen island. The phone buzzed once a new email. The subject line read, "Media Inquiry Megan Smith, the woman who walked away." I laughed quietly to myself. I didn't walk away. I walked forward. I deleted the email without opening it. The world could make its stories. I had already written mine. Before bed, I opened my journal one last time. The pages were full now. Notes, reflections, names of people who had tried to silence me, and those who had helped me find my voice again. At the bottom of the final page, I wrote a single sentence. "Freedom doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just breathes." I closed the journal and placed it on the nightstand. The window was open, letting in the soft hum of the city. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't waiting for someone to recognize my worth. I already knew it. As I turned off the light, I thought about all the women who might be sitting somewhere tonight, reading stories like mine, wondering if they too could break free from the people who tried to define them. The answer I wanted to tell them was yes, you can rebuild. You can be forgotten and still rise. You can lose everything that never loved you and find everything that finally does. If you've been listening to this story, if you've ever been the quiet one at the table, the overlooked, the underestimated, remember this. Silence can be power if you choose when to end it. And when you do, don't look back, build forward.